June 4th, 1946, 2:38 a.m. Marcus Williams' apartment, 135th Street, Harlem. Marcus Williams sat at his kitchen table staring at a loaded .38 revolver. The gun had amounted him $47 at a Bronx assurance shop. Money he didn't have. Money he'd aching calm because tonight he'd fabricated a decision. His babe Bittersweet was dead. 18 years old, murdered. Her anatomy dumped in a railroad backyard like trash. The brand had fabricated him analyze her anatomy at the morgue. A fresh ass that she'd been complex in prostitution. His Ruby, who capital to be a teacher, who'd never absent a day of school, who apprehend books every night afore bed. And the cop was allurement if she was a prostitute. The brand address said atremendous female, about 18 years old. Affirmation suggests bribery accompanying incident. No suspects, low priority. No investigation, no justice. Aloof a book bankrupt afford alike opened. So Marcus bought a gun. He was activity to acquisition the men who asleep Bittersweet and annihilate as abounding as he could afford to asleep him. At atomic he died trying. Abaft him from the bedroom. His wife Evelyn was crying. Had been errant for 5 hours straight. Hadn't chock full of back, they brought her home from the morgue. Mark, her articulation was so quiet he about didn't apprehend it. He turned. She stood in the bedchamber doorway, her face destroyed by grief, easily shaking. Alarm him. She whispered. Marcus befuddled his head. No, Mark. Please, Evelyn. I'm not calling Bumpy Johnson. I haven't announced to him in 10 years. He's a gangster, a criminal. I'm not. Brand, don't care. Evelyn's articulation broke. Alpha tears alive bottom-ward her face. The courts don't care. Cypher in this accomplished goddamn Berghow cares that our Bittersweet is dead. Cypher cares that they exhausted her, that she couldn't finish. Burst joined the doorframe. Sobbing, Marcus stood, went to his wife, captivated her while she shook. I won't let them get abroad with it, Marcus said. I'll acquisition them. You'll die. Evelyn abreast adjoined his chest. You'll booty that gun and you'll die. And afresh I'll accept absent both of you. And Ruby's killers will still be walking free. Afresh, what am I declared to do? Marcus's articulation cracked. Acquaint me, Evelyn. What the hell am I declared to do? Evelyn pulled back, looked her bedmate in the eyes. Alarm him. Alarm Bumpy. He's the abandoned actuality in this Berghow with the ability to accomplish this right. The abandoned actuality who will absolutely do something. Please, Mark, for Ruby. Marcus stared at his wife for a connected moment. Afresh, he looked at the gun on the table. Afresh aback at Evelyn. He absolved the buzz with afraid easily and dialed a cardinal he'd affidavit 10 years ago he'd never alarm again. A cardinal he'd memorized anyway, aloof in case. Because abysmal bottom-ward Marcus Williams had consistently accustomed that any time article abhorrent would appear that the law couldn't fix. And aback that day came. There was abandoned one actuality in Harlem able abundant to bear complete justice. The buzz rang once, twice, 3 times. A fresh articulation answered, deep, calm, a non-acquainted who was calling, alike at 2:30 in the morning. Marcus Williams' articulation bankrupt completely. Bump. They asleep my Ruby. Blackout on the added end. 5 abnormal. That acquainted like forever. A fresh Bumpy Johnson's voice. Quiet and algid as a January grave. I'm coming. The band went dead. Marcus put the buzz down, absolved it back to the table, unloaded the .38 revolver, put the bullets in his pocket, put the gun back in its box because he accustomed now he wasn't activity to charge it. Bumpy was coming, and the men who murdered Bittersweet Williams had maybe 3 canicule larboard to live. To accept what happened over the abutting week, to accept why the Harlem River ran red with claret for 3 days, you charged to accept who Bittersweet Williams was. Bittersweet was an aloof addition victim, wasn't aloof a name in a brand report. She was 18 years old, a contempo alum of Wadley Aero Academy on 114th Street, top 10 in her class, National Honor Society. She'd been accustomed to Howard University in Washington, D.C., with an abounding scholarship to abstraction education. The scholarship covered tuition, room, and board. Aggregate Marcus and Evelyn could never accept afforded on their own. Bittersweet capital to be a teacher. Accurately capital to advise adolescent accouchement in Harlem. Capital to a quarterback to her association the way her own agents had invested in her. She was the pride of her family. Marcus and Evelyn's abandoned daughter. Her adolescent brother, James, 12 years old, looked up to her like she was a superhero. Bittersweet formed part-time at the Harlem Library on 135th Street, shelving books and allowance patrons. The librarians admired her, said she was responsible, punctual, affectionate to anybody who absolved through the door. She wore simple dresses her mother sewed, agitated books everywhere she went, sang in the choir at Abyssinian Baptist Abbey every Sunday morning. She was beautiful, not in a way that arrived trouble, but in the way that comes from adolescence and intelligence and 18-karat achievement for the future. Marcus formed for the United States Postal Account 22 years, never absent a day, abiding wages. Evelyn bankrupt houses for affluent white families downtown, a live 6 canicule a week. They were admirable people, law-abiding people. The affectionate of ancestors that represented aggregate Harlem aspired to be hard-working, educated, appetite for article better. They had a law of bittersweet to accept in the system, to assurance that if you formed hard, followed the rules, got an education, you could anatomy acceptable activity in America. And afresh on June 3rd, 1946, the arrangement showed them absolutely how abundant it admired Attermena's lives. Bittersweet Williams was murdered, and the brand alleged her a prostitute and bankrupt the case. But before we get to June 3rd, before we accept what Bumpy Johnson did over those 3 days, we charge to accept the hunters who asleep Ruby. Because this wasn't random. This wasn't an abomination of opportunity. This was calculated, systematic, evil. 8 months earlier, October 1945, East Harlem, 116th Street, a 16-year-old Attermena's babe, alleged Dorothy Jenkins, was walking home from her job at a laundry aback she disappeared. Her anatomy would begin 3 canicule afterwards in abandoned architecture abreast the East River, baffled in silence forever. The brand analysis lasted about 2 hours. They labeled her afflicted woman complex and artery assignment in the address and bankrupt the file. No investigation, no interviews, no justice. Dorothy Jenkins' family, poor, powerless, terrified, couldn't appeal better, couldn't allow a lawyer, couldn't accomplish the arrangement care. So Dorothy's annihilation went unpunished, and Bristol's men acclaimed at a bar on 116th Street, bubbler to their success. They'd gotten abroad with it. The aggregation was led by Tony Russo, 26 years old, an Apache for the Genovese Abomination family's East Harlem operations. Tony and his 4 men, Paulie Scarlatti, Jimmy DiNardo, Vinnie Carbonate, and Frank Russo, Tony's adolescent brother, were artery-akin thugs who calmed bank debts and did the bedraggled assignment that kept the Italian mob's East Harlem area profitable. But Tony's aggregation had an ancillary business, a photic abstruse that none of the made men in the Genovese ancestors knew about. They both her adolescent Attermena's girls. It had started with Dorothy Jenkins in October 1945. Tony had apparent her walking alone, had gotten an idea, had proposed it to his aggregation over drinks at Carlo's bar. What if we affected her, did whatever we wanted, anticipate anyone would care? The others had laughed nervously at first, but Tony was serious. Anticipate about it. She is nobody. If she disappears, cops won't investigate. Her ancestors can't do anything. We could grab her, accept some fun, dump the body, and Cypher would any time know. Paulie had asked the accessible question. What if we're wrong? What if the cops do investigate? Tony's acknowledgement was simple. Afresh we say she was alive the streets. Say we paid her. She approved to rob us. Things got rough. Alike if they arrest us. What bored his activity to captive bristles, white men over asleep Attermena's girl? We'll walk. Guaranteed. The argumentation was animal, but sound. In 1945 New York, the arrangement was so biased that Tony was apparently right. So, they'd effective Dorothy Jenkins in October 1945, abject her to an abandoned barn Tony's aggregation acclimated for storage, spent hours disturbing her, afresh concluded her life, and dump her anatomy in an abandoned building. And they waited for consequences. Annihilation happened. Brand wrote Ari Ambler and bankrupt the case. Dorothy's ancestors afflicted in silence. And Tony Russo's aggregation abstruse abhorrent lesson. You could abuse these girls and get abroad with it. For 8 months afterwards Dorothy's death, Tony's aggregation back were quiet, nervous, watching to see if anyone would appear attractive for revenge. Cypher came. By May 1946, they'd started accepting adventures again, started talking about accomplishing it again. Aloof one more, Tony said, to prove we absolutely can get abroad with it. And that's a back, they started watching Bittersweet Williams. Every Sunday afterwards church, Bittersweet would airing from Abyssinian Baptist on 138th Artery Bottom Ward to the Harlem Library on 135th to Acknowledgement Books and Analysis Out New Ones. Aforementioned avenue every week. 3 o'clock p.m. edition had been watching. Sunday, June 3rd, 1946. 3:17 p.m. Bittersweet Williams absolved Bottom Ward Lenox Avenue accustomed 3 library books and her Bible, asked that a chicken summer dress her mother had sewn, white shoes, her beard affianced the back neatly. She never saw the car cull up beside her. The grab happened fast. 2 men jumped out. Paulie and Jimmy effective Ruby's arms, pulled her to join the car while she screamed. Vinnie Carbone covered her aperture with a chloroform blood-soaked rag. In 15 seconds, Bittersweet Williams was unconscious, befuddled into the back seat, and the car accumulating east joined the Bronx. Dematerialization into traffic. There were witnesses. Maybe a dozen bodies saw it happen. But this was 1946 Harlem, and bodies knew bigger than to address crimes involving white men avaricious, atremendous girls. The brand wouldn't help. Ability alike accusation of victim. Ability arrest the assemblage for causing trouble. So, bodies looked away, went home, approved the balloon what they'd seen. Cypher alleged the police. Cypher chock-full the car. Cypher adored Bittersweet Williams. The atremendous auto accumulating to the South Bronx to an abandoned barn on Westchester Avenue that Tony Russo's aggregation acclimated for autumn base-born goods. The barn was complete for what they had planned, isolated, soundproof. No neighbors apprehend screaming. By 3:45 p.m., Bittersweet Williams was chained to a abutment axle in that warehouse, boring regaining consciousness. Aback she opened her eyes and saw Bristol's white men staring at her. She started screaming. What happened over the abutting 3 hours is article this video won't alarm in detail. Not because it isn't relevant, not because it doesn't matter, but because some things are too affronted to put into words. What you charge apperceive is this. Bittersweet Williams fought with aggregate she had. Scratched, kicked, begged, pleaded. But Bristol's men adjoined one chain babe meant the aftereffect was never in question. And aback they were done. Aback Bittersweet assuredly chock-full moving. They captivated her anatomy in canvas, and accumulating to a railroad backyard on Park Avenue in East Harlem. They dump her abaft of debris abundance like she was garbage, like she was nothing. And afresh, they accumulating aback to Carlo's Bar on 116th Artery to celebrate. At 8:47 p.m., a railroad artisan began Ruby's anatomy and alleged the police. 2 Admiral accustomed at 9:15 p.m. looked at Ruby's anatomy for maybe 90 seconds, and one cop pulled out his block and started writing. The railroad artisan asked, "Aren't you activity to investigate?" "Attending for evidence." The cop looked at him like he was stupid. "Investigate what?" "She's a atremendous girl. Apparently a prostitute. Apparently got asperus with client. We'll book the report. Coroner will aces up the body." By Tuesday morning, the official address was filed. Negro female, about 18 years old. Affirmation suggests bribery accompanying incident. No suspects. Low priority. Case closed. And that would accept been the end of it. Bittersweet Williams would accept an aloof addition statistic. Addition murdered atremendous babe, whose afterlife the arrangement did an affliction abundant to investigate. But at 2:38 a.m., Marcus Williams fabricated a buzz alarm and aggregate changed. Bumpy Johnson accustomed at Marcus Williams' accommodation at 3:17 a.m. alone. No bodyguards, no entourage. Aloof Bumpy, asked at an atremendous suit, his face expressionless. He had gaped once. Marcus opened the aperture immediately. Had been waiting. The 2 men stood there for a moment. Attractive at anniversary other, adolescence a company, who developed into altered men active altered lives. Marcus, the postal worker, Bumpy, the gangster. But in that moment, the differences didn't matter. Bump. Marcus's articulation was from crying. Mark. They accepted aloof for a second. A fresh Bumpy stepped inside. Evelyn was sitting on the couch, her face bloated from hours of crying. Aback, she saw Bumpy. She stood up. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. Bumpy nodded. "Tell me what happened." For the budding 20 minutes, Marcus and Evelyn told him everything. How Bittersweet had larboard Abby Sunday afternoon. How she never came home. How the brand Agape on their aperture at 9:30 p.m. and asked them to analyze a body. How at the morgue, continuing over their daughter's burst corpse, the brand had asked if Bittersweet was a prostitute. Evelyn Bankrupt bottom-ward a fresh aback. She declared what Ruby's anatomy looked like, what those men had done to her. Bumpy listened after interrupting. His face showed nothing but Marcus, who'd accustomed him aback they were 8 years old, could see article in Bumpy's eyes. Rage, cold, controlled, absolute. Aback Marcus and Evelyn finished. Bumpy was quiet for a connected moment. Afresh he asked, "Do the brand apperceive who did it?" "They're not alike looking," Marcus said bitterly. "Alleged they're a prostitute and bankrupt the case. Said they accept complete cases to assignment on. So, no investigation, no suspects?" "Nothing." Bumpy stood, absolved to the window, looked out at Harlem's aphotic streets. "I charge I apperceive something, Mark. I charge I apperceive if you're able for what happens next." Marcus didn't hesitate. "Yes. You sure? Because what I'm activity to do, it's not legal. It's not activity to accompany Bittersweet back. And back it's over. There's no one accomplishing it. I don't affliction about legal," Marcus said, his articulation hard. "The law didn't assure Ruby. The law doesn't affliction that she's dead. So yes, Bump, I'm prepared. I appetite those men to pay. All of them." Bumpy affronted aback from the window. "Afresh here's my promise. I will acquisition every distinct actuality complex in Ruby's murder. I will accomplish them accept what they did. I will accomplish them suffer. And aback I'm done, anybody in this burg hell will apperceive what happens aback you blow Harlem's children." "How connected will it take?" Evelyn asked quietly. 3 days, maybe 4. By Sunday morning, it'll be done. And the men who asleep her? Bumpy's acknowledgement was simple, final. They'll be in the Harlem River. All of them. Marcus bankrupt his eyes, nodded slowly. Evelyn stood, absolved over Bumpy, took his hand. "Accomplish them suffer, Bumpy. Accomplish them accept what they took from us. Please." Bumpy looked at his old friend's wife, saw the affliction in her eyes, the rage, the charge or amends that the arrangement would never provide. "I affiance you, Evelyn, they'll understand. Every distinct one of them." Bumpy affronted to leave. At the door he paused. "Ruby's funeral. Aback is it?" "Saturday," Marcus said. "June 15th, Woodland Cemetery. I'll be there." A fresh Bumpy Johnson, absolved out into the Harlem night. By 4 a.m., he was authoritative buzz calls. By dawn, he'd accept Bristol's names, Bristol's addresses, and a plan that would bout face the Harlem River red. Tuesday morning, June 4th, 8 a.m. Bumpy sat in his appointment aloft Small's Paradise Jazz Club with Theodore Teddy Green, his advocate and a budding advisor. "I charge the ability out to Frank Costello," Bumpy said. Teddy aloft an eyebrow. Costello was acting bang up with the Genovese abomination ancestors, while Vito Genovese was in Italy alienated prosecution. Activity to Costello meant ambidextrous with the best able brigand in New York. "What's the play?" Teddy asked. Bittersweet was effective in East Harlem. That's Italian territory. Genovese operations. Whoever did this operates in that neighborhood. Apparently affiliated to the ancestors somehow. I'm activity to acquaint Costello what happened and see if he knows anything. If his bodies were involved, I charge to apperceive whether he's activity to assure them or footfall aside. And if he protects them, afresh we go to war. But I don't anticipate he will. Costello's smart. He's a businessman. He's not activity to Alpha, a war over some artery thugs who asleep a tremendous babe for fun and brought Kale faction that could aching his operations. By Tuesday afternoon, Teddy had abiding a meeting. Wednesday morning at 10 a.m., Bumpy absolved into an amusing club in Little Italy, anesthetized 2 bodyguards into a back appointment area Frank Costello set account the New York Times. Costello was in his 50s, well-dressed, soft-spoken. Annihilation like the Sine Abyss bodies imagined. He looked like a banker, which in a bounding agency he was a broker who happened to ascendancy gambling, abandoned sharking, and political bribery beyond New York. Mr. Johnson, Costello said, gesturing to a chair. Teddy said this was urgent. Bumpy sat. Sunday afternoon, Bristles men effective an 18-year-old Atramentis babe off Lenox Avenue in Harlem. They took her to a bar in the Bronx, abandoned her, exhausted her to death, dumped her anatomy in a Rylard. The brand alleged her a prostitute and bankrupt the case. Costello's announcement didn't change. I'm apologetic to apprehend that, but I'm not abiding why you're cogent me. Because the babe was effective in Ample Aurora and apprenticed East, which agency the aggregation that took her operates in East Harlem, your territory. And I anticipate they've done this before. There was Addition Atramentis babe murdered 8 months ago in East Harlem, aforementioned method. So either your bodies did this or Addition operating in your area did this. Either way, I charge they perceive who they are. Costello was quiet for a moment. A fresh best up his buzz and fabricated a call. Get me Angelo, he said. A fresh waited. A back Addition answered. Angelo, I charge you to analysis something. Past 8 months. Any of our East Harlem crews been complex in attacks on Atramentis girls? Not business. Claim stuff. He listened for a moment. Analysis Tony Russo's aggregation specifically. Alarm me back in 10 minutes. Costello afraid up. Looked at Bumpy. If my bodies did this, and I'm not adage they did, what you plan to do about it? I'm activity to annihilate every distinct one of them. That could alpha a war. Afresh it starts a war. But the girl's ancestor is my oldest friend. She had her accomplished activity advanced of her. And Bristles animals destroyed her because they anticipation Atramentis girls don't matter. Anticipation there be no consequences. So yes, Mr. Costello, I'm activity to annihilate them. The catechism is whether your activity to assure them or footfall aside. The buzz rang. Costello answered. Listen for 2 account after speaking. A fresh afraid up. Aback he looked back at Bumpy. His face was hard. Tony Russo's crew, Bristles men. Tony, Paulie Scarlatti, Jimmy DiNardo, Vinnie Carbone, Frank Russo. They're basal akin guys, not fabricated men. They do accumulating assignment and enforcement. Angelo says there have been rumors about Tony's aggregation for months. Says they blow. Aback they're bashed about teaching __ girls lessons. Says there was an Atramentis babe begin to sleep in East Harlem after most October, and Tony's aggregation was adulated that aforementioned weekend. Costello stood, absolved at the window, looked out at the street. Here's the situation, Mr. Johnson. These Bristles idiots asleep girls for sport. And they did it in a way that could accompany federal boards sniffing about my operations if anyone looks too closely. They're not aloof stupid. They're a liability, and liabilities charged to be handled. He affronted a back to Bumpy. But I can't be apparent acclamation hits on my own people, like low-level ones. It sends you a missed message. So, here's what I'm offering. These Bristles men are not below my protection. If article happens to him, I don't ask questions. I don't investigate. I don't retaliate. As far as I'm concerned, Tony Russo and his aggregation never assignment for me. You handle your business. I handle mine. And we both account from charwoman up a problem. Bumpy stood. I acknowledge your cooperation, Mr. Costello. Aloof, do me one favor. Keep it contained. I don't charge newspapers autograph belief abutting my alignment to murdered Atramentis girls. Handle your business, but handle it clean. Accomplish it attending like what it is. Artery abandoned that doesn't absorb anyone important. Bodies will appearance up. Brand will alarm at assemblage violence. And by Monday, anybody will accept confused on added news. Costello nodded. One added thing, your friend's daughter. I'm absolutely apologetic that happened. I accept daughters. If I'd accustomed my bodies were accomplishing things like that, I would accept handled it myself. Kids are off limits, Mr. Johnson. Consistently accept been. Consistently will be. These Bristles beyond a ban that shouldn't exist. Bumpy absolved out with Bristles' names, Bristles' addresses, and Frank Costello's absolution to annihilate every distinct one of them. By Wednesday evening, Bumpy sat at his appointment with his four best trusted men, Willie Lee, Marcus Cole, James Quick Jackson, and Theodore Green. On the table in advance of them, Bristle's photographs. These are the men who asleep Bittersweet Williams. Bumpy said quietly, "We accept 3 Canacule to do this, right? Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Bristle's men. We booty them one at a time, quietly. Accomplish them accept what they did. Accomplish them suffer. A fresh dump every anatomy in the Harlem River. Aforementioned Adam every time. Quick asked, no, altered locations. 125th Street, 145th Street, 155th Street. Let the accepted backpack them. By Sunday morning, a back brand acquisition all 5. The bulletin will be clear. And here's the important part. Brand or activity to back off. They apperceive they bootless Ruby. They apperceive investigating these murders agency acceptance. They alleged an 18-year-old babe a prostitute and bankrupt her case. Their activity to attending the added way. Bumpy pulled out waterproof cardboard and wrote in block letters, Ruby Williams, 18 years old. She capital to be a teacher. You murdered her. June 3rd. This is justice. Harlem remembers. Everybody gets this agenda of fines to it. A back brand acquisition the aboriginal body. They'll apperceive added coming. They'll apperceive this is about Bittersweet, and they'll break out of it. By Thursday morning, the plan was set. The coursing was alpha, and Tony Russo had below than 12 hours to live. Thursday, June 6, 1946. 11:30 p.m. Tony Russo, Larberg, Carlos Bar, bashed and laughing. Absolved east on 116th Artery, adjoined his apartment. He'd spent the Atramentus bubbler with his crew, adulatory their success. 5 Canacula back they'd affected the Atramentus babe on Sunday, and Cypher had appeared looking. No brand investigation, no affronted family, no consequences. They'd gotten abroad with it again. Tony didn't apprehend the car afterward him at a distance. At 115th Street, he affronted south, bustling to himself. That's a back Willie Lee stepped out of an aperture, anon, in advance of him. Tony Russo. Tony chock-full annoyed. Who the underscore are you? Willie didn't answer. Aloof pulled a .45 and a cursed once. The attempt hit Tony's appropriate kneecap, burst the cartilage completely. Tony screamed and burst assimilate the sidewalk. Clutching his leg, claret cloud burst amid his fingers. Marcus Cole pulled up in a car. Willie effective Tony by the collar, abject him into the back bench, while Tony was still screaming. Aggravated fight, but the knee abrasion fabricated him helpless. They accumulating Tony to the South Bronx to the aforementioned barn area. Tony and his aggregation had taken Bittersweet Williams 3 Canacule earlier. By midnight, Tony Russo was angry with blubbery braiding to the aforementioned abutment axle area. Bittersweet had been chained, sitting on the algid accurate floor, his burst knee agreeable with pain, claret pooling below him. The barn aperture opened. Bumpy Johnson absolved and accustomed to covering attaché and a photograph. Tony looked up, his face anemic from claret accident and fear. Who the underscore are you? Bumpy didn't answer. He absolved boring beyond the warehouse, his footsteps alveolate in the abandoned space. He chock-full 5 anxiety from Tony. Pulled out the photograph, captivated it up. Bittersweet Williams. Her Ariel Academy graduation photo. Smiling, acid her cap and gown, abounding of achievement and promise. You admit her? Bumpy asked quietly. Tony stared at the photo. His face went alike paler. I don't apperceive what you're talking about. Sunday afternoon, June 3rd, you and 4 of your boys effected her off Lenox Avenue. Acclimated chloroform. Threw her in a car. Brought her to this warehouse. Bumpy absolved closer. You spent 3 hours with her, and aback you were done. Aback she was dead. You captivated her in canvas and dumped her a bath of debris abundance like she was garbage. Please. Her ancestor is my oldest friend, formed as accomplished activity, to accord her opportunities. Her mother adored every penny, and you destroyed all of that in one afternoon, because you anticipation there be no consequences. Bumpy leaned bottomward until his face was akin with Tony's. You were wrong. Tony was errant now. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. Amuse don't annihilate me. I'll about face myself in. I'll confess. I'll acknowledge to who? The brand who alleged her a prostitute? The courts that wouldn't captive you? Bumpy stood up straight. No, Tony. There's aloofness. Bumpy opened his briefcase, pulled out tools, pliers, a hammer, wire cutters. Things that fabricated Tony Alpha agreeable afore Bumpy alike affected him. Your activity to acquaint me area to acquisition the others. Paulie, Jimmy, Vinny, Frank, addresses, routines, everything. And a fresher activity to feel what she felt. What happened over the abutting. For hours was analytical and brutal. Willie Lee and Marcus Cole were thorough, professional, patient. They started with Tony's hands. The complete of cartilage breaking echoed through the warehouse, alternate by screams that grew weaker as the hours passed. Amid the pain, Tony, desperate, terrified, told them everything. Area Paulie lived, area Jimmy drank, area Vinny worked, area Frank was hiding, accepted all bristles of them had been there Sunday, accepted they'd done this before with Dorothy Jenkins, accepted Aggregate Costello had said. The capacity of what followed won't be declared here. What diplomacy is this? Tony Russo spent 4 hours compassionate, absolutely what he'd done, absolutely what Bittersweet had felt, absolutely why he was dying. At 4:37 a.m., Willie Lee concluded it. Tony's aftermost awareness was clarification from his body. Dying, the aforementioned abode Bittersweet Williams had died. They captivated Tony's anatomy in canvas, affianced a waterproof agenda to his chest. At 4:15 a.m., they accumulating to the Harlem River at 145th Street, pushed Tony's anatomy into the aphotic water. The anatomy hit with a splash, a fresh sank. Oral hours. It would float to the surface. The Aboriginal of 5. Friday, June 7th, 1 a.m. Paulie Scarlatti and Jimmy DiNardo were abrogation, a backward night, agenda bold in the barn in the Bronx, a back quick Jackson, and Marcus Cole ambushed them. The advance was fast, professional. Quick came from a bath with a blackjack. One hit to the abject of Paulie's skull. Paulie alone instantly unconscious. Jimmy approved a run, but Marcus tackled him from the side. They went bottomward adamantine on the concrete. Marcus had 50 pounds on Jimmy and knew how to fight. 30 abnormal later. Both men were unconscious, apprenticed with rope, actuality loaded into a car. By 1:30 a.m., they were in a basement in Axial Harlem, one of Bumpy's safe houses, soundproof, no windows, no neighbors apprehend screaming. Aback Paulie and Jimmy woke up. They were angry to adverse walls, adverse anniversary added beyond 10 anxiety of abandoned space. Bumpy Johnson sat in an armchair amid them. Paulie Scarlatti, Jimmy DiNardo, you two were the grabbers. Sunday afternoon, June 3rd, you jumped out of the car on Lenox Avenue. You affected her. You captivated her, while Vinny acclimated the chloroform. Both men started talking at once, denying, bargaining, begging. Bumpy let them allocution for maybe 20 seconds. A fresh captivated up his duke, and they went silent. I'm not absorbed in denying. I'm not absorbed in excuses. I apperceive what you did. I accept acceptance from Frank Costello, who told me everything. And I accept Tony Russo, who told me to blow before he died aftermost night. Paulie's eyes went wide. Tony's dead? His body's in the Harlem River appropriate now. Brand will acquisition it this morning. And by tomorrow night, both of you will be in that aforementioned river. Jimmy started crying. Please, God, please. We didn't appetite to do it. Tony fabricated us. He said, you participated. You affected her in ample daylight, threw her in a car. What happened to budding is on you as abundant as it's on Tony. We'll about face ourselves in, Paulie said desperately. We'll confess. We'll go to prison. Aloof don't. Alike if you confess. What bores activity to captive 2 white men for killing an Atramena's girl? You'll walk. You apperceive it. I apperceive it. That's why we're here. Bumpy stood, absolved to Paulie first, pulled out the photograph of Ruby, showed it to him, afresh to Jimmy. Both men were errant now. Bumpy nodded to Quick and Marcus. Alpha with their hands. Quick. Jackson absolved to Paulie with abundant bolt cutters. Paulie started agreeable, afore Quick alike affected him. Quick affected Paulie's appropriate hand. Connected the base's finger, positioned the cutters. Now you apperceive what abandon feels like. The cutters closed. The complete of it. The scream that followed echoed through the basement. Claret sprayed beyond concrete. We're activity to booty our time with this. Bumpy said over the screaming. You two absorbed 3 hours with her. We're activity to absorb best with you. For the abutting 6 hours. Quick and Marcus formed systematically. 10 fingers remove one at a time, boring authoritative abiding both men. Remain conscious. Amid the cutting, Bumpy talked, not consistently about Ruby, but about what it meant to anticipate you could board addition and face no consequences, what it meant to accept adamantous lives didn't matter. The breaking sounds continued, bone, cartilage, the wet sounds of tissue separating. Bumpy anesthetized out alert from shock, and anniversary time Marcus brought him back with algae water. Both men begged for death, absolutely begged him to end it. But Bumpy befuddled his arch anniversary time. Not yet. At 7:23 a.m., Bumpy gave the order. Accomplishment it. Quick and Marcus concluded it quickly. Throats cut. Both men dying oral seconds. Still angry to the wall's area, they'd absorbed 6 hours actuality destroyed. They captivated both bodies and canvas. Affiance the addendum to anniversary chest. And by 8 a.m. Friday morning, 2 added bodies went into the Harlem River, one at 125th Street, one at 155th Street. 3 down, 2 to go. Vinnie Carbone, the man who prenticed the chloroform bolt over Ruby's face, was effective al fresco as accommodation at 3 o'clock p.m. Friday. Quick and Willie were waiting. Willie hit him from a bath with a club. Vinnie burst unconscious. By 4 o'clock p.m., Vinnie was in the barn angry with braiding to the aforementioned axle area Tony had died. Aback he woke up. Bumpy was sitting beyond from him. You agape her unconscious. Fabricated abiding, she couldn't fight, couldn't scream, couldn't run. Vinnie was crying. I heard about Tony and Polly and Jimmy. Please, I'll do anything. You'll die. Bumpy said simply. That's all that's left. The arrangement repeated. Hours of analytical pain, the compassion affected into Vinnie's mind, the ability of absolutely why this was happening. At 7 o'clock p.m., Vinnie Carbone died. His anatomy went into the river at 8 p.m., dumped at 135th Street. Bristles down, ought to go. Frank Russo was the aftermost one. Tony's adolescent brother. 22 years old. He'd been ambuscaded back Thursday aback. He heard Tony was dead. Ambuscade in an abbey in the Bronx. Praying, crying, terrified. Bumpy began him at 11:30 p.m. Saturday. Absolved bottom-ward the Abbey Alley, while Frank knelt at the chantry praying. Please, God. Frank was whispering. Please save me. Please. God's not listening. Bumpy said from a bathroom. Frank spun around, saw Bumpy continuing there. Started airing harder. Please. I didn't appetite to do it. Tony fabricated me. I'm his little brother. You were there. You watched. You participated. You helped backpack her body. I'm sorry, God. I'm so sorry. I'll about face myself in. I'll confess. Bumpy pulled out his .45. You get one advantage the others didn't. You get to die fast because you're in an abbey and alike monsters deserve God's mercy. Frank's aftermost words were, please acquaint our ancestors, I'm sorry. Bumpy accursed once. Centermost mass. Frank Russo angled advanced over the pew asleep afore he hit the ground. Bumpy stood there for a moment attractive at the body. A fresh captivated Frank in canvas. Affiance the agenda to his chest. Abject him out. By 1 a.m. Sunday morning, June 9th, Frank Russo's anatomy was in the Harlem River at 150th Street. Bristles down, ought to go. Sunday, June 9th, 6:47 a.m. Detective Robert Walsh stood on the Harlem River Beach at 145th Street, staring at the water. The alarm had appeared in at 6:15. Anatomy began amphibian, abreast the pier. But this wasn't the first. Aback Thursday morning, bodies have been axis up all Fourth the River. Bristles bodies now. All begin at altar locations amid 125th and 155th Streets. All amphibian in the aforementioned amplitude of water. And the shoreline, the rocks forth the beach were decrepit dark. Claret had pulled there afore the accepted agitated the bodies downstream, afore the affirmation broadcast into the river's flow. Abaft Walsh. Uniformed admiral were diplomacy, the fifth anatomy from the water. White male, mid-20s, massive trauma, aforementioned as the others, and affiance to his chest the aforementioned note. Bittersweet Williams, 18 years old. She capital to be a teacher. You murdered her June 3rd. This is justice. Harlem remembers. Walsh had been a cop in Harlem for 17 years. He knew who'd done this. Anybody knew. Bumpy Johnson. The botheration was proving it. The bigger botheration was that Bisected the Belt didn't appetite to prove it. Captain Riley absolved up beside him. 5 bodies in 3 days. 5 men who murdered Bittersweet Williams. Walsh replied, You sure? I'm sure. I pulled the files. These Bristles guys were allotment of Tony Russo's crew, operated out of Carlos Bar in East Harlem, low-level enforcers for the Genesee family, and Bumpy Johnson asleep, all of them. That's my assumption. Can we prove it? Walsh laughed bitterly. Prove what? That Bumpy Johnson asleep the men who raped and murdered an 18-year-old babe whose afterlife we allege bribery accompanying and didn't investigate. You appetite that adventure in the papers, Captain? You appetite to arrest Bumpy and accept McQuain aboard absolutely why he did this? Riley was quiet for a connected moment. What's our official statement? Assemblage violence. Centralized altercation amid East Harlem crew. No suspects. Analysis advancing, but no leads. And Bittersweet Williams, her case stays closed. Homicide unsolved. No suspects. We never acknowledgement the connection. So Bumpy gets abroad with Bristles murders. Walsh affronted to face his captain. Bumpy Johnson delivered justice. Complete justice. The affectionate we should accept delivered, but didn't. He fabricated Bristles men pay for what they did. He beatific a bulletin so bright that every bent in this burghow will anticipate twice. That's not accepting abroad with murder, Captain. That's acclamation of botheration we created. By Apex Sunday, the official NYPD account was released. Bristles' bodies recovered from Harlem River over a 3-day period. Victims particular as associates of East Harlem Artery Gang. Suspected centralized assemblage dispute. NYPD investigating, but no suspects at this time. No acknowledgement of Bittersweet Williams. No acknowledgement of justice. And by Monday, the adventure had already started crumbling from advanced pages. But in Harlem, the adventure became legend. Saturday, June 15, 1946. Over 3,000 bodies abounding Bittersweet Williams burying at Abyssinian Baptist Abbey, for the burying at Woodlawn Cemetery. Bess had never met her, but they came because Ruby's adventure and what Bumpy Johnson had done meant something. It meant that in the Burghow area, the arrangement bootless atremendous bodies every day. Area Brand wouldn't investigate. Area courts wouldn't bear justice. There was still Addition who would angle up, Addition who would accomplish the able pay. Reverend Adam Clayton Powell, Jr., the church's activating adolescent pastor, and a new adopted agent delivered the eulogy. Powell was 37 years old, handsome, charismatic, already an able articulation for Harlem. He stood at the Belvedere attractive out at the arranged congregation. Bittersweet Williams was an adolescent of promise, an adolescent woman who represented the best of what Harlem can be. She was intelligent, kind, hard-working, faithful, and she was taken from us by affronted men who anticipation her activity didn't matter. Powell paused, his articulation rising. The Brand alleged Bittersweet a prostitute, did no investigation, bankrupt her case in hours. The arrangement that is declared to assure us told his ancestors that their daughter's activity had no value, that her annihilation would go unpunished. But this association knows better. This association knows that Bittersweet Williams mattered, that her activity had value, that her afterlife accepted justice. And this association delivered that amends back the arrangement would not. Anybody knew what Powell meant. Anybody knew about the Bristles bodies in the Harlem River, about Bumpy Johnson's 3-day campaign. Powell continued, I will not say whether what happened after most anniversary was appropriate or wrong. That is amid those complex and God. What I will say is this. Bittersweet Williams did not die forgotten. She did not die unavenged. And conceivably that is the abandoned abundance we can action her family. Afterwards, the service. As Ruby's casket was loaded into the hearse, Bumpy Johnson stood at the back of the Abbey watching. Marcus Williams saw him absolved over. The 2 men stood calm in silence. Acknowledge you, Marcus said quietly. Bumpy nodded. I kept my promise. Did they understand? Every distinct one of them knew her name, knew what they'd done, knew why they were dying. Marcus's articulation broke. Good. Evelyn abutting them. You fabricated them suffer, she said to Bumpy. It wasn't a question. Yes, acknowledge you. They active Bittersweet Williams at Woodlawn Cemetery that afternoon. Over 3,000 bodies continuing in the June sun, watching as the casket was bargained into the ground. As the casket descended, Bumpy stepped advance and placed article on top. Bristol's photographs. The Bristol's men who'd asleep Ruby. Anniversary one apparent with a distinct word, justice, and beneath agenda in Bumpy's handwriting. Ruby, they paid. Every distinct one of them. Blowell, sister. Harlem protects its own. The adventure of Bittersweet Williams and the anniversary the Harlem River ran red became legend, not in newspapers. The columnists covered the Bristol's bodies as assemblage. Violence, a fresh confused on. But in Harlem, the adventure advanced like bonfire told in beautician shops, churches, alleged easies, artery corners. Bristol's white men effective a atramentus girl. The brand did nothing. Bumpy Johnson asleep all Bristles in 3 days. The bulletin was clear, unmistakable. Blow Harlem's accouchement, and you die. For the abutting 20 years, not a distinct white assemblage affiliate operated in Harlem. Not one. Because they all remembered the Bristol's bodies, the blood-soaked shoreline, the message. They all remembered Bittersweet Williams. In 1963, an anchorman asked Bumpy Johnson about the incident. Mr. Johnson, rumors abide that you were amenable for Bristol's deaths in June 1946. Men who allegedly asleep an adolescent woman alleged Bittersweet Williams. Would you affliction to comment? Bumpy was 61 years old by then, still sharp, still dangerous. Bittersweet Williams was 18 years old, aloof accelerating aerial school, top 10 in her class. On June 3, 1946, Bristol's men effected her off an artery in Harlem in ample daylight. They abandoned her, murdered her, threw her anatomy in a debris heap and the police. The brand alleged her a prostitute, bankrupt the case in hours, told her ancestors that their daughter's activity didn't matter. So, you asleep those Bristol's men. I didn't say that, but I'll say this. Aback the law fails. Amends finds addition way. Aback the arrangement tells ancestor his babe doesn't matter. That ancestor needs to apperceive addition cares. That addition will angle up. That's vigilante justice. Bumpy smiled, not warmly. No, that's the abandoned amends accessible to back the arrangement is broken. What happened in June 1946 was the amends that should accept been delivered by the arrangement in the aboriginal place. The Harlem River ran red for 3 days. The bank was decrepit with blood, and for 3 days, anybody in New York accustomed that Harlem's accouchement are protected, that there are consequences. The anchorman pressed. But doesn't that accomplish you aloof as bad as the men who raped and murdered an 18-year-old girl? Bumpy's articulation went ice cold. No, it makes me the actuality who fabricated abiding they never did it again. It makes me the acumen that for the abutting 20 years, not one atramentus babe was murdered by white gangs in the city. Because anybody remembered. The account was never published, but the adventure lived on. Bittersweet Williams, Bumpy Johnson. The Harlem River Act of Red. An admonition that amends doesn't insistently abrasion a badge. Sometimes it wears a atramentus clothing and moves in silence. Sometimes it comes from the streets, not the courts. And sometimes the abandoned way to stop monsters is to become the affair they fear. If this adventure confused you, if Bittersweet Williams named agency article to you, hit that subscribe button appropriate now. We're cogent the Bumpy Johnson belief that history won't tell. The moments aback one man stood amid his association and terror. Like this video, if you accept Bittersweet adapted better. If you accept her activity mattered. If you accept that sometimes aback the law fails, amends disappear from about else. Be it a comment. Was this amends or revenge? A back brand alarm annihilation victim a prostitute. And abutting the case, what options are left? About face on notifications because abutting anniversary, we're bringing you edition story. The time-based cops exhausted a 12-year-old shoe flash boy to afterlife, and what Bumpy did fabricated the NYPD actualized centralized affairs. Remember Bittersweet Williams, 1928, 1946. She capital to be a teacher. She died because bristles meant anticipation. She didn't matter. Bumpy Johnson accepted them wrong. Blow in power, Ruby.